Welcome back to We Know Scripted TV, where today we know Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 6, Thanksgiving, brackets, Canada? It's not a question, it's a statement. But my name is Grace Leeder, and of course, I'm not alone. I'm here with Jess Sterling. Jess, how you doing?
Yeah, you're from Canada, so obviously there has to be an uptick in your voice. Is Canada?
Canada? Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited. Grace, do you wanna sing with me? Ah!
Sorry, there's some people. I mean, major spoilers to the episode. There's some people watching us as we're singing
Mhm.
and screaming. What an episode!
There's so much, Grace. So I watched this episode before you did, and you were like, "Oh, does any, like, major thing
Mm,
happen?" And I'm like,
mm.
"I can think of 3." I'm like, "There are, like, 3 separate things that I feel like I would put exclamation points on," right? There's
Yeah.
so much. Like, the end of this episode is, oh, because we all know what's gonna happen next. We all know. Grace!
Well, I feel like the thing about it for me probably is that as I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, that should have been the end of the episode. Like that should be the thing that's at the end of the episode." And then there's like kind of another moment you're like, oh, "Okay, like okay, they left it to do this." And I was like, "Oh no, that's why it's the end of the episode," you know? So there's a lot of really good TV on. Tara and I chatting on the Tastemakers each week. And this week we're sort of just like at the end of all the stuff that's like new on and then we're catching up on. We're like, oh yeah, and then also there's like The Pit, Severance, White Lotus, and
Yeah.
Yellow Jackets as well. And we've been talking about I was saying that sort of all of those shows each week there's this sort of interesting thing that's happening. I feel like White Lotus, people are feeling a little like, oh, is it like happening at the same pace it normally did? Has it been, whatever? Mind you, we'll leave everything about the White Lotus over with Rob and Josh. But my one big thing is like stuff keeps happening in Yellow Jackets, and it's the thing I'm very appreciative about the show so far in season 3 is that they just keep doing more, keep
Ugh,
doing more. It's my note to
yes.
showrunners: keep doing more.
Go
Jess.
for it. I think that's the lesson that should be taken away is like go for it. Do it. If you want to do something out there, do it. See what happens, right? Sometimes maybe it doesn't hit, but in this case, it hit and it hit hard because even though we still don't know who Hilary Swank is, even
Hey,
though
I'll talk to the showrunners later. I'll talk to them later. Don't
even though
worry.
we haven't seen her, one of our YouTube commenters did point out very kindly that like we didn't see Lauren Ambrose as Van until very far into the season 2 when she arrived. So like, yeah, okay, that's true. But you know who we did see? Lisa. Lisa made a return, which means my friend and yours, Grace Taryn Armstrong, can return watching the show
That's
now. So loves Nicole
finally
Maines.
That's great. Nobody spoiled it. Don't add him or
Don't
anything.
tell
Let him
him.
be surprised. I think he's gonna watch it, even though he's just listen, between the two of us, we're
Taking
watching a
his time.
lot of TV right now. Okay. Every week we're watching everything that's new on and trying to see if it's good while also trying to
Yeah.
watch all this stuff. I like started a Twins Peak watch through, Jess. I've got through one episode.
Yeah.
So
There's so much on. There's
I know.
so much on.
I
But
know.
this show, I will beat the drum every single week here. I beat the drum to everyone I know in my real life
It's
that
good for
this
you to
show
beat the
is
drum
still
because it's easier to
incredible.
sing along to. It's easy to scream. Go, go,
Ah,
go, go,
yeah.
go. Sorry, I interrupted you again.
No, 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 you're fine.
But
This
it was to
show
make
is
a joke.
well, then it's worth it always. You can't let that moment slide by, you know? But this episode was incredible and I'm really, really excited to talk about it because there are just like we always talk about Grace, like what's the headline, right? What's the headline of
Yeah.
the episode? There are like 3 headlines this episode. I think the biggest one is probably the bird watcher nature people discovering the girls, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can tie it together because it's the heading, it's the headline, but then there's the subheader, which is basically like, the group has been found, subtitle, they also found the dying body of Coach Ben.
the
Um,
head specifically.
the head of Coach Ben. So, yeah. So, okay, one thing I just want to, you know, pop up front is something that like so I saw the episode the name of the episode. I kind of in my head I kind of like saw it and was like, oh, and obviously it says Canada in it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's where I
Yeah.
live, which is not America, and although perhaps soon to be,
Stop it.
and was thinking. And then I kind of like forgot about the episode title, like sometimes I do that and then I come back to it and we do this and out for that. I'm kind of like, I really like it. I like naming conventions and things like that. So I
Mhm.
tend to think about it. I kind of just like forgot because so much, again, as you said, so much stuff happens that then when you were talking, you were like, yeah, and like, we're pretty close to winter. And I was like, wait, what? Like it was just spring. It was just the summer solstice, which is June.
Yeah.
So I guess June to October. And if case folks are listening, if you're American and you forgot, we celebrate our Thanksgiving a full month sooner. So it's not November, it's October.
Honestly, it makes more sense because like we're like November's we're too close to Christmas with Thanksgiving. It's like too much going on, too
You
much
know what?
close to the winter holidays. We need a break.
No, you know what? You can keep it there because actually, as a Canadian, there's a lot of ways in which actually, like, because we're so obsessed with them, like we're so. I've been Melissa and I, Dr. Melissa and I, have been on this tangent for years of like Americans don't realize how much what you do impacts us. All of your media, all of your politics, everything happens. I actually kind of like the way because like I get my holiday, like I get like time off in October, and then in November, like if I work with any Americans or anything like that, like they're not working and they're off, so it's like you kind of get it off. You kind of get it off as well. There's like
Oh, I
football on a
see. You
Thursday. You kind of
benefit
yeah. I took
from our holiday. I see.
my brother and I and our and his brother-in-law, we took American Thanksgiving off this year, and we like just ate food all day and watched,
Oh,
even though it
that's
wasn't a real
fun.
holiday. I know, so we kind of get like 2 Thanksgivings,
Okay,
and
so we
then
won't move it. We'll
yeah,
keep
don't
it here
move it,
just for you. Just for you.
don't move it, don't move it.
Mhm.
So I just want to briefly talk about the time jump that it feels like, and it's not a time jump, I guess, because it's like we've been following these events, but it does seem like
Yeah.
we've been sort of on fast forward. I think it does in terms of what we see makes sense in terms of Coach Ben starving himself and the fact that they
Speaking
wanted
of
to
fasting.
actually.
Yeah.
Speaking of fasting forward, as we wanted to, I feel like in terms of the things we see, I guess I'm like fine. The more I'm like in it, I'm like, oh, that's fine. I think probably, but my initial reaction is like, oh, really? We skipped a lot of time, but if
Well,
to service a
yeah,
story, it's fine, maybe.
it's been a few months and I think that it's almost too subtle in the show, right? I
Mm,
think they're
mm,
trying.
mm.
Yes.
That's exactly it. Sorry, I was just
Yeah,
agreeing
yeah,
with
yeah.
you.
It's
Yeah,
it's it's too subtle in the show because we get a montage of Nat trying to get Coach Ben to eat, right? But in my opinion, that felt more like it's been a few weeks versus it's
yeah,
been a few months. And maybe it's possible that like we were moving through time quicker than we thought through
I
the
think
first
so.
couple of episodes.
Yeah,
So his hunger strike isn't as long as months. But yeah, we do get other hints of it being close to winter in Van and Ty trying to kind of like ready the shelters and saying winter's coming, like, but we're more prepared this time, and so on and so forth. We are certainly getting there though. We are getting closer to the winter months, which I agree with Grace. Like, I think it's a little shocking, a little jarring because we know the creators have said we have 5 seasons in mind. We know they get rescued around the 19, I think it's 19 months in, meaning we are now like super fast forwarding to them getting rescued. However, I would rather have us moving too fast than moving too slow. I think like there are other shows that are currently on television, Grace, that you were saying that have been accused of the pacing being off. Like, when
people
is
have been
something
using the
going to
B
happen?
word. We'll use it the B word.
Yeah, we're not using the B word here because I do think we're moving at like, yes, maybe a little bit of a breakneck pace, but at least stuff is happening, right? Like, I I think there were some people in the camp of Coach Ben is still alive in the present. We're going to see Coach Ben. They've like he has like plot armor at this point. Like, they've threatened to kill him so many times they won't actually do it. I like that they actually did it. That it did finally happen, that like we have put a bow on his storyline. And I think it's poetic. I think it makes sense, Grace, that Nat's the one to put him out of his misery, and that this is kind of the impetus, the breaking point for the group. I don't know if splintering is even the right word because it kind of seems like they're all on board with Shauna being the new leader, but with taking Nat out of power and putting the antler crown or whatever on Shauna.
Yeah, I really like this whole story. So one thing that I thought so just let me speak a little bit about some meta stuff for a second, Jess, which I actually
Yes,
haven't
please.
like fully talked to you about, I think. But so just so folks know, you and I we get to watch the episode a little bit ahead. We're very privileged. Paramount Plus has graciously given us some screeners to be able to watch the episode beforehand and be able to watch it a couple times and then have do the episode. We are not spoiled ahead. We only
No.
watch the episode that we're about to podcast with, then we podcast, and then if we're able to, we watch the next one. I got a request for having written for Parade, starting to write for Parade, to do a feature on Steven Kruger. And I thought, that's interesting to me. It's not out of the ordinary for someone to just be on a show, for them to do it. There was a thing where he has a directorial debut coming. He directed a short film that's coming out. We talk about it a little bit in the interview. I thought the interview was really lovely that he did with Steven Kruger, but it was a little bit of me being like, interesting that they are doing sort of a PR press for Steven Kruger on this show. And so I was like, I think there's a pretty good chance Coach Ben dies this season. I think that the show, whether it's not for this reason, but the more that Coach Ben was not dying, even though he was so clearly should have been dying, I was like, oh, they tricked me. I got tricked. They like
Yeah.
got me to do press for a character that I thought was like certainly going to die and then didn't die. And then finally they did it. And I do feel like there's a world where that could have felt pretty drawn out. And I think probably like nobody else is going to be in the situation that I'm in, where like I knew that they were asking me to do press for him, and then I thought he was probably going to die, and then he didn't die. Like nobody else in that situation. So it might be that it works more effectively for me than maybe other people. I think ultimately where we go, and I think the fact that they draw out his death, and I think it's like it is immensely cruel when you think about the way that his like tendon had been cut, right? And that's one of the things that I thought maybe, oh, that's going to be a thing that then um is going to be a thing that Shauna's worried about in the future, right? That like if there's evidence to show that they like tortured this dude, that's like not good for them.
Right.
The fact that it got drawn out, I think actually makes the scene where Nat finally decides to give Ben what he's asking for. I feel like it really worked for me. It's really tragic. It's really sad. I do think that there's been like it's been this guy's life has been so awful for so long that the fact that Nat is finally willing to do it, I think actually works. So I think like in conjunction with this idea of like it feels like it's been many episodes for us. That's a little bit where I'm like jarred. Like the time jump stuff, like for me, the timeline is like jarring because it does feel like we've been here for a while. So that to the point where Ben actually asked Nat to do it and she does it. I feel like actually sort of it does feel like, yeah, I get it. I get that Nat can be in this position of watching this man suffer for this long.
Certainly, because he goes on a hunger strike. He's not eating any of the food they're giving him. It ends up rotting and smelling, and so they discover it and then realize, okay, we're gonna need to force feed him because he
Definitely
is our
thought that was
bridge
just him
home.
smelling, right? Definitely thought
Oh,
that
certainly,
I
that's
was just I
exactly
thought
what I
Mari was
thought.
just gonna be like, you smell this. I thought he
Also,
like
couldn't he have
pooped his
just
pants.
fed the animal, or excuse me, fed the animals that he's in a cage with all the food? It
That's
doesn't matter.
true. That's true.
But either way, I think watching him starve himself and then having to watch or listen to the group force feed him in these horrifying masks, I don't really understand the purpose of, beyond if they're doing some sort of a ritual, right? Like this feels like we are taking another step and another step closer to the first scene that we get of the entire show with Pit Girl and all of that, right? The ritualization of everything here. Nat can't handle it anymore. And I think if we are looking at the show, knowing these characters and those characters acting how you'd expect them to act, it makes so much sense to me that Nat would be like, she is the closest person out here to Coach Ben. She makes the decision of, I've had enough. I'm putting him out of his misery. I know they need hope. They need to know that they're, he's our bridge or whatever, but we've gone too far at this point. And I like that it's Nat, and I also like that it's Travis who discovers her. And even though they're not dating anymore, right? We haven't seen hardly anything of them in scenes together. He also he was part of the team of people that had to force feed Coach Ben. But he is also a person who was very close to Coach Ben.
Yeah.
And so having him be like, okay, fine, like I will keep watch.
Mm.
It all made a lot of sense to me. I also found it really interesting, Grace, that Misty is kind of the one who discovers that this has happened, and she's screaming, she's yelling like, oh, put her on trial for murder, she murdered him, right? Like she's flipping out. We know she obviously felt very close to Ben.
Very close to Ben. She's very close to Ben
I
this
didn't need to
episode.
see her kiss the dead body. Truly, I didn't. These are
I
things I didn't need.
I did. It was on my bingo card, so I'm just gonna cross that on.
Good job. But I think it's really interesting to think about this betrayal from Nat to the group,
Yeah.
and how then also you feel those reverberations a bit like looking at present day Misty and Nat's relationship, right? Like there must have been some sort of repairing of that relationship while they're still out in the wilderness over time. But Nat is treated like you have betrayed us. He was our bridge home. Like, I can't believe you did this. And Grace,
Yeah.
we get our first situation in which the Yellow Jackets are eating a person. They're being cannibals, not out of necessity.
Right. Can so I I heaped praise on the show up top. Can I give my so I guess I was about to critique the show, but I'm kind of critiquing where I think things are going rather than what's happened so far.
Okay.
So let me start with yes. So they are they eat Coach Ben. Nat has forced to dismember the body as punishment. It's Shauna who's sitting here being like, no trial. Where Nat's just gonna serve punishment for this, and she does. They have this ritualistic sort of the singing and celebration moment, which is then immediately cut off by these bird watchers who show up. I feel like the bridge to Coach Ben thing, I feel like we had a little bit of a tough time being like, how does that make sense? How is Coach Ben the bridge home? I think what we're going to see is that so welcome to the show, Nelson Franklin, who people might recognize from Veep. He's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's pretty well. He's sort of like, I would have never remembered his name, but I was like, his face is very familiar. Very bad news, I think, for these bird watchers to have seen the Yellow Jackets eating Coach Ben and dancing.
They see his
head.
platter.
Yeah, but we'll get there. Bad news for these people, which then feels to me like if these people go missing and they're looked for, and that's how the Yellow Jackets are found, that makes more sense to me than like Coach Ben's family. Like I posited that as a theory. Yeah. To me, this now, I feel like I could see a closer link to like the bird watchers find them in this situation, and then the people look for the bird watchers or whatever, and then that's how they end up getting home, even though there's still lots more time that they're going to be out there. But there's a little bit of that makes a little more sense to me, that I personally think, whether or not it's true or not, the Yellow Jackets are still going to see Coach Ben as the bridge home. And then therefore, Nat killing Coach Ben will not be seen at some point as a bad thing she did, but actually as the thing that needed to have happened for Coach Ben to become the bridge home.
And we do have, if we're looking all the way back to, season 1, I think, and when they're in the van trying to hunt down who's blackmailing the Yellow Jackets, and they say, like, Nat saved us out there, right? Like, we always thought, oh, she's a hunter, she's a provider. That, I mean, it could be true. All of it could be true. But her killing Ben and him becoming the bridge and all of that also could make sense there. In my mind, because we know it is only Canadian Thanksgiving, if we're believing the title to give us the timeline. We know it's October. We know they don't get rescued for a little while longer. Like there's still some time that needs to pass. This is not the exact date of their rescue. And we also know we have yet to see the very first scene of the whole show, the wintertime pickerel situation, the ritualistic cannibalism that happens.
Yeah.
So my prediction is, yeah, these people are goners. They've seen too much, and it's not just that they've seen the girls doing this when they don't need to. There's a difference between consuming human flesh if it is I eat this or I die. But they treat it like it's a religion, right? They say when people die out here, we honor them. And like Shauna is using that, right? Like Lottie is the one who is the most ingrained in this whole wilderness thing. She is the one who says Shauna will lead us. Shauna is the leader. And
Yeah.
Shauna says when people die out here, we honor them. And Nat is forced to be the one to prepare Coach Ben's body to be eaten. And it is all of them are consuming him. And all of them are like kind of donning these outfits. They're sitting around a fire. We are getting closer and closer to the first scene of the show, I think.
Yep.
And we've talked a lot about, Grace, like what is it that they've done that they're like so afraid of people finding out? Obviously cannibalism is a big deal, but cannibalism out of necessity is so different than what they're doing here. And also, I think we could be looking at what are they going to do to these bird watchers, you know?
I think this is it. This is the moment that I think completely changes. I mean, I do think killing Coach Ben changed it, but there was still the way in which it was for the it was about justice for the fire.
Right.
So it changes it to me. It's the moment that they sort of are singing and dancing, having eaten and like killed and eaten Coach Ben, and now this moment with the bird watchers that to me becomes the point at which they are going to they basically have done something and are en route to doing something that is unexplainable for the means of survival. I think
It's
we're
the point of no return, I think.
I think we're at the point.
And when Lottie is like, everyone's saying, right? Everyone's screaming. We hear animal noises, nature sounds, like, smashed on top of it, almost as if they are animalistic. They are acting fully just in a way that isn't using thought or reason. And so, yeah, this is also fascinating. I feel like these people are goners because they've seen too much. They've seen Ben's head is on a platter. Like, it is not a situation of how can you argue, oh, we just killed him because he tried to murder us. Like, you don't put a man's head on a platter if that's what you're doing, like, I think they're just going to be like, well, we know what we got to do now. Let's take these people out.
Okay, so I want to talk about the screaming earlier in the season. I think it's episode 1 or 2. I think it came in the first week. They hear the screaming out in the woods, and my thing that I tuned into is that they all heard it, right? They all reacted to hearing the screaming. This time, it's like as they do it, they can almost like activate it, and I'm super interested in this. There's two things here. One is I want to know what it is because we could say this every week. I'm still on the train of there's a logical explanation for every supernatural thing that happens on the show. So I want to know, like, the other piece of this too was I kind of feel like the moment that these folks show up, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if the beginning of next episode breaks the yellow tint hue. I almost feel like there's almost too much happening in this episode to also add that on, probably. But I wonder whether the appearance of an outsider suddenly like breaks that illusion, whatever sort of Yeah.
I like this idea, and I think it goes along with we got a comment on our YouTube channel. Make sure you're watching us on YouTube if you're not. We know scripted TV. From SFin13 who says, I thought of Ben being a bridge as more of a metaphorical bridge. He's the bridge for the girls between wilderness and society. If they cut him loose, he will fall, and they will lose a part of themselves that they will never get back from the wilderness. By keeping him alive, they haven't crossed that line where it will be easier for them to return to society. That is so fascinating. Like, this is the point of no return. You kill Ben, you're lost forever. You are forever this kind of like these animals versus, you know, a part of society, a part of, you know, normal quote unquote society. And yeah, I do think this is kind of the point of no return for them. And I have a question for you, Grace, because we do get another, I'd say less importantly, but still important in terms of the whole story. We get another vision from Aquila where I don't know if it's claymation. I
It
apologize.
doesn't really seem
I don't
like
know what this
claymation.
is.
It seems like it's almost that, but it's not quite that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but we see a bear and it has a third eye. And we know third eye, it's like, oh, seeing another reality,
Yeah.
right? Like there's some
Yeah.
sort of like prophesizing that happens. And what do you make of this? Obviously, we've seen bears before, right? There's a bear that
Mhm.
approaches the camp that Lottie kills. They like donate the heart. They sacrifice the heart to the wilderness.
Mhm.
Do you see, is there anything you're taking away from the bear with a third eye?
The thing that throws me off about it is that like she also saw a talking llama. You know? Like
That's
how
what
do I
happens when you huff gas, Grace. Some stuff it's
uh,
prophecy, some stuff it's, well, you did just
hey,
huff gas.
correction. That's not what happens when I huff gas. No, I mean, it's funny because this one feels like I don't have the connection to it now, but it almost in some ways feels like the most sort of, it's the most like tropey hallucination thing, like a third eye, and the fact that it's connected to the wilderness. The bear before seemed to mostly represent just sort of the wilderness, but do we have let's look up bear
Bear
meaning. What does it
symbology.
mean? Yeah, when you see a bear, that's what I would be looking at. I guess strength, some cultures maybe healing and courage. I mean Aquila trying to stand up maybe to Shauna. Like I do feel like, so what I was gonna say earlier was I feel like Shauna's just sort of placed as ruler. Like she gets named by Lottie as like, nope, Shauna's in charge. No trial. She picks up the punishment for Nat. I almost do feel like the way in which like it might then get revealed that like, oh, Ben was actually, and I really love the piece about Ben being the bridge. He's actually the you know actually that's actually really great. The idea that that actually um uh the fact that they just killed and ate him, and then immediately there are people who might have been able to save them, and they're actually going to have to kill them, means they are like metaphorically burning that bridge. I think that is
Exactly.
actually like really strong. um I think that Shauna being, and the piece that I was trying to get to is that Shauna has just sort of been named leader. I feel like there is going to be a fierceness to defend um her. And actually the reason I'm like kind of in I can't make a coherent thought right now is because I was thinking that like that potentially Ben as still the bridge to get back home would mean that they would eventually see that like Nat was right and that Shauna shouldn't be the leader. But I actually think if they've just burned the bridge and there's actually reason to like for them to get more entrenched in this belief system with Shauna as the leader. So my like that's why I'm quickly
Yeah, it's because
shifting my thoughts.
Nat killed Ben. Now they, instead of being discovered just as teenagers in the woods that
Yeah.
were in a plane crash, they are now discovered eating Ben's body because Nat killed him. So like it's Nat's fault. So it's really interesting. I think we could look at it different ways, and we won't really know what it means obviously until we see the fallout of what happens here with the bird watchers.
And I think as it relates to Keela, this feels like bad news in the sense that I feel like Aquila might actually be, when everything has happened with Shauna Lottie and Shauna to me felt at odds, right? And Lottie has been tuned into this thing of like, it's actually Akila who actually knows what's going on. And to me, that's scary because I think that in the sense that Shauna is now entrenched and will try to hold on to that power, will try to make sure that Lottie's belief system works for Shauna and not anybody else. And the more that Akila is having visions and is, the bear symbolizing strength and courage and maybe trying to stand up to Shauna means that's very bad news for Akila. Like I would significantly move Akila up in my like she's probably gonna die.
Yeah.
And the other piece of this that we should mention is in this episode, there's I think a very significant thing that one of the adult yellow jackets says, which is everybody who knows about what happened out there is us or dead. Is that exactly what she says? I'm gonna
That's what Van says. Yeah. And I think, I'm sure you did this too, Grace. Anyone who heard, we don't get much of what is on this DAT tape.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That Shauna has that has been in the back of our minds since Callie received it. If you forget, there was an envelope with the symbol on it and Shauna's name on it that had this DAT tape in it that was left for Callie. I don't understand why a single person wouldn't be like, let me go on eBay and try to buy one of the DAT tape players. But hey, who am I to judge?
Is it DAT tape or it's disc tape?
Stop it! It's DAT tape. And so we don't hear much of it. We like hear the very beginning of it, and then we cut back to Van Ty and Shauna, and they've already listened to it. But what we do here is testing, 1, 2, 3. Oh my God, what is this? Then we hear female screaming noises, and I believe we hear the no that we also hear from Lottie in the past timeline when she sees the bird watchers. We also get a reference to bird watchers because Van says the only people I know that like use these sort of things are like these people and bird watchers. And then she gets this look on her face. So I think, and Grace, I'm curious to know if you agree. I think this tape is from the bird watchers that discover them that we are seeing in the past timeline. And yeah, like you said, Van says the only people that know about this are us or dead.
The one minor annoyance I have here, again, I love this episode. I think the season has been good, so just my critiques are small. I hope this isn't the end of Shauna and Misty's sort of conflict here. I feel like that was like actually to me really strong. And if it's sort of like now Shauna's just like, well, it's definitely not Misty. She definitely doesn't have to be telling the truth to Van and Ty about that. Like she definitely could still think for some reason that's Misty. I really don't. My thing is like, I'm a big wrestling fan, Jess, as you know, and I feel like sometimes things will happen and it gets so annoying when you're like, I thought these two people were going to fight and they never fought, and if we don't get sort of, I feel like we were building all season to like Shauna and Misty having this like blowout in the modern timeline.
I still think that's there. And can I tell you why?
Please.
Because when Misty, we could kind of talk a little bit about Misty as well in this whole conversation. Misty is still on the investigation trail, right? She is still playing citizen detective. So she is trying to figure out
she's going to figure out Shauna killed Lottie. Yeah.
So here's the situation, right? So Misty gets the bag of trash from Walter. He's trying to get back into Misty's good graces. He gives her Lottie's trash. Misty goes through it. She finds the Chinese food container and she's like, why the hell would Lottie order from this place? Turns out Lisa works there, and the $50K that Lottie took out of the bank on the day that she died, she gave it to Lisa. And Lisa has this information that, that Lottie met up with Ty on the day that she died. So, of course, that is suspect, as we think possibly other Ty killed Lottie. But what's also important that happens to Misty this episode is that she gets the DNA results of the scrapings underneath Lottie's fingernails that she has given to a fellow citizen detective friend guy, right? She can't interpret the DNA because what is DNA good for if you have nothing to match it up on? Now, who does Walter have DNA of? Shauna. So because he took the hair out of her hat. Now, the other thing is, Grace, going back to our post episode 5 theories and feedback podcast, what if now Walter has run Shauna's DNA what if it's not an exact match,
Mm-hmm.
but a partial match? And it's Callie's DNA, which would make sense given that she is Shauna's biological daughter, that they would have 50% the same DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably that would also cause strife between Misty and Shauna. I think it's like a massive possibility that they're hitting pause on the fight, but they will hit resume and we will get like a massive blowout between the two of them if there is anything to do with Shauna's DNA being anywhere on Lottie's body.
Yeah. So the last two pieces of information, just to talk about this quickly, is Callie has been recording Shauna's messages, and Shauna deletes them, but doesn't actually delete them.
You got to delete out of the deleted folder. You can't.
You gotta clean out your mailbox, your recycling bin on your computer. You can't just leave them there.
I love Callie's little smirk too when she sees it. She's like,
she's so
stupid
Shauna.
Boomer. Okay, Boomer. The delete box.
The other information that I feel like is big and I feel like very satisfying to get at this point is that it has been other Ty the whole time. We see Ty wake up and be sort of like screaming for help, only to then sort of snap out of it, and other Ty return. So it does feel like the whole time, every scene from this season has been other Ty. That feels pretty satisfying. Like not only for like you to have clocked it, but also to get sort of that reveal
confirmation, right? Because I thought all we were gonna get, Grace, from this episode was Van when she finds the DAT tape player thing. Her like super old 90s vintage.
I actually love that came around, that like Van owns the 90s like video rental store, and then she has access to this like
it makes
90s
perfect sense.
It's great. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she has her I used to love anytime phones, Game Boys, computers had this like see-through transparent casing and you could see all the inner workings. But the phone rings, obviously it's not connected to anything and it's a landline, so that's weird. And when she answers it, it's Van saying like, please, it's Ty saying, Van, please help. Which she thinks is weird. And I do think that is when Van's spidey senses start tingling.
Yeah,
like,
she knows
what is going on. Especially because Ty has been acting cool as a freaking cucumber. And Grace, something else I noticed, and this could mean nothing, but it could mean something. When Van and Ty are in the hotel room getting massages, ordering room service, Ty orders like 3 different food items with meat in them. And in the very first season, she's said to be a vegetarian.
Interesting.
So
wow, you're picking up all the deets, Jess.
I can't help it. Listen, I watched these episodes a couple of times because
Citizen Detective Jess Sterling.
And I think Van is giving her a little bit of a weird look, right? Like she's acting like light and fluffy and airy, and like she blames it on, oh, I just want to live my life that I have with like the woman I love. But I think Van is like, you're acting too happy. Like there is some serious stuff going on, and you're being too light and fluffy about it. Which box cutter do you want? Red or yellow? Like it's too much. So I think Van was already a little suspicious, but certainly her waking up and being like, Van, help, in her sleep is a massive indicator. And this would also, Grace, tie together the fact that I had said, why, if other Ty is around, why is real Ty not noticing the gaps in her memory? Well, if other Ty is around literally all the time, Ty wouldn't have the opportunity to ask for help,
Right. Yeah, exactly. It does sort of seem like she's like trapped in there. I think this was really strong. I think it's a really strong episode. Nice to see Nicole Mayans as Lisa back. I kind of feel like that's potentially all we are gonna get of Lisa. I don't know if that feels like it to you. We don't leave that on
I think this is kind of it, because we're not gonna like follow up on like, okay, Lottie obviously cared about her, so she gave her the $50K, but Misty can now take this information and go back to Ty with it. I don't necessarily think we need Lisa in the plot anymore. I would love to see more Nicole Mayans. I really enjoyed her in season 2. I just don't know that she's necessary for the plot at this point.
Yeah, which unfortunately I would like to see Lisa more involved, but not that she's over it, but she's very much like, I know I was in a cult. Relax.
I loved that.
Yeah. I feel like part of our, like, I almost feel like, surprised we haven't gotten longer. I feel like we've kind of talked about everything, is the sense that I feel like we got so much information. And actually, I think that this is a pretty good place in terms of, um, I feel like this episode was a lot of like clarity and confirmation on things that at least put us in a place where it's like, in the sense that it's not like they asked us questions that then we had to solve. So like there was a lot of, I think after last episode when Shauna and Lottie's dad have it, definitely didn't I think somebody in the YouTube comments also pointed out like it could actually just be about the plane crash. Like he could be his thing about like it was an accident and the guy's not going to get paid any money. Like it could have been related
Yes.
to the plane crash from the 90s because he's having dementia. That was a pretty good thing. I know people are kind of split on whether, well, I think more people are actually find Shauna's pretending to be Lottie an act of kindness to Lottie's dad. I still don't. I still love that, but it's fine. I'm it's interesting that people um have sort of that differing view. All that to say, I feel like this episode is a lot of like I think clarity, and I do think it's good just to say that I feel like even if we didn't get things exactly right, I feel like things are moving in a way that seem logical to what we thought might happen. So I think that like the Coach Ben stuff and like the people finding them and then like that bridge stuff and that's not what we thought it was going to be, but I think it makes sense within the world. My biggest concern about mystery box shows is when they try to trick us, and I feel like I really want the showrunners, not that they're listening to this, but I want them to know I'm very appreciative that like people are in the social media age, people are obsessing over this stuff. And there are a ton of theories that are out there that were wrong. And there are a lot that were right about what's happening. That doesn't mean that I don't want with more withholding of information. I feel
No,
like
we
this was like,
should be able to read into certain things.
yes,
Like, it's a good thing that a lot of us were able to latch onto the fact that Ty was acting strangely and that
yep.
we thought maybe other Ty was involved, especially with this thing Sammy says. Like, there's a lot that tracks, and that's a good thing. Because if no one is able to guess what's going on, and then more likely than not, we're going to be like, that doesn't really make sense. That's not in line with what we've seen. So I appreciate, I understand what you're saying, Grace, and I totally appreciate the fact that yeah, we're gonna get some stuff wrong, and it's okay if we get some stuff right because that means that you've seeded it into your show in a way in which eagle-eyed viewers and the people like us that are obsessed with the show that want to theorize about it are going to pick up on some things, and that's a good thing.
Do you want to see my impression of me being an eagle-eyed viewer?
Please.
Ah! That's it. Uh I don't know if eagles say "caw." I don't know if that's what that's.
I just so hope that people are watching the YouTube video because if you
caw!
weren't, Grace not only said caw, but her shoulders just went up just a little bit.
I have one other thing that I want to highlight as a comment that we got in the YouTube that I absolutely
please.
love as a theory, and it totally changed the way I view a thing that's been a sort of a story on the show, which is I had a little bit of trouble with the idea that Van had cancer and then her cancer went away and then her cancer came back. I really had a tough time with that as somebody who like I do not have cancer. I've not had cancer. I live with chronic illness, and there was something that was bugging me about the idea of like it's basically like the Michael Scott like snip snap snip snap. I don't like it. I don't like it. Somebody pointing out that what Van has is not cancer. It might be like unnamed wilderness disease, and I was like, oh my god, that feels just so much better for me to think that like what Van has is not cancer. It's like and again, there is like the way in which like it's funny because the explanation I want is more supernatural, and I feel like I'm much more on the vein of like I like the non-supernatural answers.
Yeah.
But this idea that the wilderness has given her something that in testing for it has shown up
like cancer.
The symptoms and the tests that they run feel like it's cancer, but it's not cancer. I don't know whether like again, this is one that I kind of like was hoping like people would let me know how they feel about this. I feel like this one worked for me. If I feel like I haven't heard like people like I had cancer, and it does or does not work for me. Like, it's fine. Like, that's not what I've heard. But so I would be wondering on the opposite of like, if it's like unknown wilderness disease, she has a willness. That's not really good. That's not good. I was trying to combine wilderness and illness. Doesn't work. It's fine. Caw. Um, I like that. I like that way more than I
Yeah.
like she actually had cancer and it went away and then it came back. I also saw some people talking about like we've been reading too much into the like handshaking thing, and the handshaking thing is separate than cancer diagnosis, whatever, blah, 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 blah. All that to say, I like the idea that it's not cancer, it's been like something showing up as cancer and that can go away or
It's
go away
almost
depending on the
like
wilderness. I like that.
yeah, this was a comment by Molly863 on our YouTube channel. And I like it too, and I especially like the idea of like almost like a final destination sort of thing. I've seen some people theorizing on this, and we chatted a little bit about it, but like almost like the wilderness has given Van so many chances. Like there are so many times when Van should have died and didn't, and in the plane, in the cabin, like there are so many moments by
Uh-huh.
wolves, and she has been saved, and now it's almost like her, she's come due. Now the wilderness is deciding, I'm going to leech off of you. I'm going to take something from you, and I'm not going to do it quickly. I'm going to do it over a long period of time in a what is a very painful, difficult way to go. So I like that idea. I think it would be really interesting. I'd be curious to see how they would do something like that, but I do
Yeah.
like it. I like the theory a lot.
I think it's
Um,
better than Van had cancer and then doesn't have cancer and then
yeah.
her cancer is back. I think it's to me it's just there's something emotionally about cancer and the way in which it like is there and is not there that I really wasn't jiving with just for a like
'Cause it's
personal.
really it's hard, right? For
Yeah.
anybody who's known anyone with cancer, it's like, that's not the way it works. It's almost like a little bit of a slap in the face because it's like, "This doesn't happen. Stop."
It
Um,
it's not ruining my enjoyment of that storyline. The moment I read Molly's comment about what if it's like a wilderness related thing,
mhm,
I jive with that so much more
yeah.
than that.
Also,
Yeah.
shout out to Sonder Days X on our YouTube channel or YouTube
Yes.
comments for mentioning that I've been obsessed, Grace, for seasons about I'm like, Tawny Cypress, she's playing other Ty when her eyes are a little red. And this
Yeah.
commenter, I love you so much. They're just like, she's wearing brown
She's just
contacts.
wearing brown contacts. Yeah.
Which
And
I
just the
which
lighting.
you know what? I'ma still believe what I wanna believe, but you're so right, and it is just the contacts, and it's
We
because they have to make, the
I know.
characters look the same in past and present, and if you have lighter eyes, it's easier to make them darker, obviously.
But also the eyes are important in the show, so,
Certainly.
we were reading into things that weren't there, but,
Yeah, I
we love all your
see
comments. We
what I wanna
see.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
always I love reading the comments. I love reading any theories. It doesn't matter if they're good
yeah.
or bad. One person was like, Lot, you're talking so much about Lottie and she's dead, or not Lottie. So much talking
Laura
about
Lee.
Laura Lee and she's dead. And I'm like, is she though?
That's the whole point. She might be back. Yeah.
Exactly. She
Yeah.
jumped out earlier today. My husband sent me a gif of all the scene from season 1 with Laura Lee flying off in the plane, and then it
Yes.
explodes. Instead of it exploding, there's fireworks in the air, and he just goes, they just couldn't see her cuz the
That's
fireworks were
right.
so
That's right.
distracting when she
That's right.
jumped out of the plane.
I think it's really impressive that they got Nelson Franklin to play adult Laura Lee. That's really exciting. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, very fun. Just one last little
Yes.
note. Wait, Hillary Swank. Where's Hillary Swank? She's supposed to be on the show. She got billed. She got advertised to be on the show. Did they Mad Libs like that? The fact that like the press release of like Hillary Swank got cast on the show. It's like, oh no, she's on this like Hulu show over there. She's not on the Paramount
Uh,
Plus Yellowjackets show. Where is she? What are you
well,
doing? Where are you?
worth noting, if she is playing Melissa or someone related to Melissa, it does seem like that storyline might be coming to a head soon because, Shauna and her whole family are on the move. They're staying at a hotel because of all of this,
Oh, we haven't
right?
talked about Jeff at all, but Jeff is tremendous at the beginning of this
I
episode.
love him
Very fun.
so much.
Me
I
too.
love him being like, "Lay down, honey. I'll get you some snacks. You know I'm a snack king.
Yeah.
I'll go to the vending." I love him so much. Grace, he's just a gem. He's
Yeah.
just a peach. I knew immediately. I'm like, she's manipulating you, bro.
Yeah.
He doesn't see it.
Yeah.
Callie, also the queen of manipulation, hugging her mom to sneak her phone in her bag. Like,
Brutal.
he's just surrounded by these like manipulative shipman women. And
Yeah.
he's just a little Peach Angel. I love him.
Okay, very fun episode. We will be back next week to talk about season 3, episode 7. Until then, Jess, what else you got going on?
You can find me at the Jess Sterling. I'm talking Last of Us. I'm talking Schitt's Creek, which oh my god, we just got to the season 4 finale, and I can't because it's so cute and I want to die. And then of course also Buffy and Felicity. So check out everything I have going on. I love to talk TV.
Check out the Tastemakers with Tara and I mentioned it earlier, and check out all my work on parade.com talking about TV. Yeah, that's it. We'll be back next week with another recap of Yellowjackets. Until then, a licky caw down.